To start in just a moment. We see there's a number of people coming in. I hope you all are having a wonderful day 2 of the conference, and we'll give people a few moments to enter the room and we will get started. All right, so I see a few more people are coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we do have 50-minute sessions, and as many of you know, that is a small amount of time to capture a lot of big ideas. So we want to make sure that we are starting and ending on time to respect all of your time. I know you all have a busy day in front of you and already have had excitement in the earlier parts of the day with the conference. So I want to start by welcoming everybody to this session. This is linking infant and early childhood mental health consultation with mental health professional development and why it matters. So welcome to the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health, the conference, Equity from the Start, day 2. My name is Sarah Davidon, and I will be serving as your session facilitator today. And I'm joined by Leslie Gaines, who will be serving as our technology host. So if you have any questions about connecting, or if you're not able to hear, if you've got anything technology related, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and Leslie and I will be keeping an eye on the chat to see if any questions come in that need our immediate attention. Otherwise, please feel free to drop questions into the chat, and our presenter, who I'll introduce in just a moment, will be allowing for some time to address some questions. The session is being recorded and transcription is available through the Zoom platform. If you need assistance in figuring out that technology, please drop a note in the chat and we can help you with that. Should you have any questions, please, as I said, relay questions in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the 50-minute session. We also want to let you know before we begin that the views and policies and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and don't necessarily reflect those of some of our funders, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the Department of Health and Human Services. So that said, I would like to pass it over to Corinna Crandall, who will be conducting our workshop today, linking infant and early childhood mental health consultation with professional development and why it matters.
Thank you, Sarah.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all for joining me today. Before I get started, I'd like to know a little bit about you before I introduce myself. So if in chat, if you could put what your role is right now, and are you an IECMHC with clinical mental health clinical training, or have you ever been an IECMHC with mental health clinical training? Just to get to know a little bit about my audience and who I'm going to be speaking with today. And when you see me looking over here, I'm looking at my other screen. Thank you, Sarah. I am also an LMFT. What is a CSWA? Clinical social worker is my assumption. Thank you. I'm going to assume it's Corinna. Okay. So the majority, it looks like, have the clinical training or background, and then some of you do not, which is great. And some of you are on your journey. Okay, I'm going to move you over here to this slide now, and that way I'll be able to start looking at this. So before I get into my introduction of who I am, I do want to acknowledge that here in Northern Colorado, where I reside, the land I am on has also been lived on by, I was surprised actually when I looked this up, the Arapaho, the Ute, the Cheyenne, and the Sioux. So this land has been occupied by several Indigenous people. I have been an early childhood mental health consultant for 7 years. Before I came into this field, I worked in the early childhood classroom for about 15 plus years in many different settings, including my own home, traditional preschool, full day childcare in traditional settings where people brought their children when they went to work, and then non-traditional where people brought their children when they went skiing in Durango. I then went on for my degree in health and human development, and then I practiced for well over 15 years as a mental health clinician, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And as I developed in my clinical work, I went in loving and working with young children and doing play therapy. And as time went on, I realized the value of working with the parents, working with the adults, because that is where sustainable changes could be made. So as I was listening to today's and yesterday's webinars, I was just reminded that infant early childhood mental health consultation looks very different in a lot of different areas. So I wanted to share with you my lens, how I view, how I have experienced infant early childhood mental health consultation. So first of all, my lens is formed and shaped by my identity as a cisgender Caucasian female. And my experience has been shaped by the Colorado Department of Early Childhood and how they have set up what consultation looks like in the state of Colorado, and also by Georgetown Center of Excellence, which is the model that we often follow here in Colorado. My community in which I live is, the majority is Caucasian and English speaking, and I am in a college and university town. And so the population is highly educated. And my team of 5, we serve mainly licensed childcare centers and those preschool programs. And those centers consist of a wide range of socioeconomic levels. Generally, the primary language that we run across is English, and then the secondary would be Spanish, with some others that are sprinkled in there. And our team primarily works with the adults who are supporting the children, or we work with the adults who are supporting the adults supporting the children, so the admin. We do very little hands-on direct work with children. What brought me to this wondering was the state of Colorado created a waiver program where a consultant could be someone without clinical training. And I felt myself having a pretty strong internal negative reaction to that. And I became curious as to why, what was going on for me, and I couldn't name it. And so I started my own journey as to trying to understand that. And last year, when I was in the certificate in infant and early childhood consultation, mental health consultation with Georgetown, this question became my capstone project. And so over the last 18 months, I have been reflecting on, why did I respond that way? What was guiding that for me? And I used my clinical supervision, I used reflective supervision, and then I was blessed to be mentored by Khadija Johnston. And then I spent a lot of time discussing this with professional peers. And so I invite you to share in my journey and see where it takes you. So this is what we're going to talk about. What is infant early childhood mental health consultation? I'm going to talk about the development of a mental health clinician and the development of an infant early childhood mental health consultant. I'm going to talk briefly about the competencies of a consultant and then bridge clinical skills and the competencies, and then talk about considerations of the workforce. So let me just start first by setting the tone with the definition of infant early childhood mental health consultation as defined by Georgetown. I want you to notice on here that the definition in itself says that the consultant is a mental health professional with early childhood training. And I call that a rainbow unicorn. When I am looking to recruit and hire for our team, my bottom line is the mental health professional, and then the bonus is early childhood training. The real bonus is those who have had time in the classroom, but at least an understanding of early childhood and childhood development. So the consultant partners with adults in young children's lives to build their capacity to foster healthy social emotional development. So again, my lens comes from supporting the adults so that they can support the children. So looking at that parallel process. So let me talk a little bit about the development of the mental health clinician. This is promoted through formal clinical education, training, experience, and clinical supervision. We start by learning mental health theories and practice, and the ones that guide me are systems theory, attachment theory, developmental psychology, and then trauma-informed and trauma-responsive care. Rapport building. Relationship is everything. Problem solving. We as a clinician are trained to help people find their own solutions, to guide them there. So we do not have their solutions, we help them find their own. Understanding of emotional intelligence, the parallel process, and in this, what is happening within us may be happening within the client. It might be a window into their experiences. So that also goes into self-awareness, understanding what's happening for us internally, and also what we're bringing into the relationship, our own personal history, our training, our temperament, and our implicit and explicit biases, just to name a few. Empathic understanding, resilience, how to build our own as a clinician resilience, and then how to build the resilience and support our clients in building their own resilience. And then unconditional positive regard and acceptance. Welcoming all into our room, our space, despite any known or assumed differences. The development of the infant early childhood mental health consultant also is through some education, early childhood training, experience, and supervision. The consultative stance. And in Khadija and Charles Brenneman's book, one way the consultative stance is defined or described is a way of being. It's how we show up. And in a conversation with Khadija, she also mentioned that the consultative stance is based on mental health principles and theories. So mental health piece is infused in so many parts of this work. Observation tools. In my state, we use the Climate of Healthy Interactions for Learning and Development, also known as the CHILD, which was developed by the Yale Child Study Center. And this is what we use when we're doing a classroom-focused consultation. And I know there are many more out there. An understanding of child development. Theory of change, coming from the Center of Excellence. It is IECMHC is an indirect relationship-based intervention. It's again, that parallel process. We work with the adults, which in turn impacts the way they're able to work with the children. And according to the COE, The theory of change explains the hypothesized relationships between where you start, what you do, and what you see as a result. Infant early childhood mental health, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. Reflective practice, which hopefully you've been able to go to at least one workshop on that so far. And then diversity informed tenets, which there are 10 of them. And these were developed by the Irving Harris Foundation. And I want to note that my reference page, so the slides that were already uploaded, my reference page was not completed. And so when I get to that, if you want to take a picture, then you'll see where all my resources come from. And I'm also going to get it to someone at Georgetown in hopes that they can upload it so that it has all the complete information. That was an oversight on my part. So I mentioned that because where to find diversity informed tenets is one of the things listed in there. A couple of them that I wanted to highlight: self-awareness leads to better services for families. And I talked about how in our clinical training, we are trained to look at our own self and how we are having an impact. And then work to acknowledge privilege and combat discrimination. And this also ties into the consultative stance of understanding all levels of influence. So the mental health clinician. We're going to do some crosswalking here. A, looking at theories and understandings that shape our conceptualization of children's behaviors and the behaviors of the adults who care for them. On the mental health side, we look at mental health theories and practice, and emotional intelligence are two things that influence that. And then on the IECMHC side, infant early childhood mental health, an understanding of that, understanding of child development. Now, this is one depiction of how these can crosswalk. Please know that other people may put this together differently, and some of these things could cross over into multiple areas. This is just a simplified version of this. B, tools that inform our work. And as a mental health clinician, we are taught how to use many tools for many situations. And then observation tools, which I mentioned. And also we use the DECA-C and the DECA for when we are doing a child-focused consultation. So the next one is how we show up. So tying these to the consultative stance. Empathic understanding can relate to understanding another's subjective experience. The parallel process can be considering all levels of influence, internal and external. Rapport building, the mutuality of endeavor coming from the consultative stance. And problem solving, like I said, that is a journey. That is something where we are a guide. So that goes very well with avoiding the position of the expert. How do we promote change? Again, looking at our own resilience and building that of others. And the theory of change, which guides us through mental health consultation. And then examining ourselves and our own influences on the process through self-awareness and reflective practice. So next I'm going to take a little bit of time on the core competencies. There are 8 of them. I will highlight 2 of them. And then after that, I'm going to look at a core skill, and I'm going to crosswalk what clinical training, how that informs that core skill or supports it. So listed on the screen are the 8 core competencies listed by Georgetown University. I'm going to highlight the role of the IECMHC and foundational knowledge. In the role of the IECMHC, again, it is mentioned as a mental health specialization that is distinct from other activities in which mental health professionals may engage. I'm not keeping up with my notes here, so I'm needing to flip some pages. So let me tell you what they describe as, or what they define as a core skill here. Demonstrate the ability to engage in a flexible and varied use of self based on the unique needs of a setting, its context, and the relationships involved. Mental health theories and practices, rapport building skills, unconditional positive regard and acceptance are three things that come, and problem solve, are what a mental health clinician might use to inform the work. And I also, and you'll see it in the references, want to refer to an article called Authentic Voice Use of Self, Essential Learning Processes for Relationship-Based Work. And in this article, it talks about using our sense of self is knowing when and how to use our own experiences and keeping the focus on how it benefits the client. Knowing how our values and our beliefs are activated within the relationship is another way of using ourself. So the other competency I want to talk about is foundational knowledge, which is seen here on the screen, which I don't need to read. I think I'm going to highlight that the large body of knowledge to understand children can come from mental health theories, can come from understanding of child development. So the core skill understands the impact of trauma, including historical trauma and family violence, on child and family development, and can educate others about trauma-informed approaches as needed. What do we bring into this? Again, mental health theories and practices, empathic understanding, understanding resilience. And when we look at a child and we learn that they had trauma, we may wonder what protective factors were in place or are in place. We may wonder if these behaviors that are challenging the adults who care for them are related to their trauma. We might wonder what promotes a sense of safety for them. And for the adults, we're also going to wonder if they share or disclose trauma history, what protective factors were in place for them, what promotes a sense of safety for them. In addition, with parents, we might wonder, does it impact their parenting? Or how does it impact their parenting? Does it impact their functioning in the world? And then for the providers, those who are caring for the young children, does it impact their ability to provide quality care to young children or to work as part of a teaching team? We become curious about how the trauma might be showing up. And one of the more recent trainings I took was trauma responsive care, which was going beyond being informed, but knowing what to do with that information. There are two different disciplines that are coming into play here. One is the understanding of mental health. The other one is the understanding of infant mental health. And as you listen to these two definitions, think about how a positive infant mental health can impact a positive adult mental health. So I'm going to read infant mental health first. Defined as, according to 0 to 3, developing the capacity of the child from birth to age 3 to experience, regulate, and express emotions, form close and secure interpersonal relationships, and explore the environment and learn all in the context of family, community, and cultural expectations. As we know with young children, all development occurs within relationship. So then you've had this as a positive experience as an infant, as a young child, as an elementary age child, and now you're an adult. Does that allow you to realize your own abilities, to be able to cope with the normal stresses of life, to be able to work productively and contribute to our community or your community? And then think of the vice versa. What if this young child has an adult who cares for them on a regular basis that hasn't learned how to regulate or manage their own emotions, and how that can impact, because we know that young children co-regulate with adults. That has an adult who's not available, maybe for whatever reason. How does that impact their ability to form close and secure interpersonal relationships? And then the adult to be in close, intimate relationships or working relationships. So thinking about the crossover, positive and negative. And looking at mental health through the clinical lens. And again, I took the definition from WHO. I want to say that infant mental health, it's a multidisciplinary field, and it encompasses all who work with young children and their families. Anyone who works with young children or their families would benefit from understanding infant mental health. Clinical mental health generally is associated with those who have completed a master's program or a PhD and who may carry the title of mental health therapist, licensed clinical social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist. Those who study and understand infant mental health and those who might study clinical mental health, they share two components: relationships and reflections. Looking at themselves, looking at others, and how they show up in the relationships and how they develop those relationships. That is a bridge, and that is a foundation for both areas. Using the clinical lens influences how we make sense of situations, of behaviors, and relationships. It's been said that IECMHC is clinical without treatment. So what does that mean? We can use the clinical lens to differentiate between cause versus behavior. A doctor is going to look for the cause. Is it a virus? Is it a bacteria? Is it an allergy? For the symptom, what's causing the symptom? Symptoms are the fever and the rash, right? And clinically trained consultant looks for the cause: autism, ADHD, trauma, many other things. And the behavior, which is the symptom, right? It's how it's showing up. The inability to focus or be still, aggressive behaviors that cause harm to peers, etc. And time spent with a consultant can feel therapeutic. And I often will tell this to the teachers that I'm working with or the directors that I'm working with. Our time together may feel therapeutic, but it's not therapy, because I'm always going to be focusing on how is this impacting your ability to be the best you can be for those children. When I start to focus or want to focus on how it's impacting other aspects of their life, then it's switching over to therapy. So that's a line I do not cross as a consultant. We also can think diagnostically without diagnosing. So again, looking at an understanding of mental wellness and mental illness. Is it child development appropriate within the range? Or is it something that might be indicative of a mental illness? Looking at how the past may impact the present. How the care provider's history influences their interpretation of the behaviors that may be challenging them. Looking at how adults and children, what is motivating their behavior? Is it a need that they're trying to meet? Is it missing a skill set? Is it coming from their internal and psychological workings? Is it because of their internalized sense of safety and danger? Is it because of historical trauma? These are things the clinical lens allows us to wonder about. The DC 0 to 5 is something that in Colorado, all consultants are trained in. And I'm bringing this up, and this is a tool formed by 0 to 3, that this, even if a person is not able to diagnose, one of the things I love about the DC 0 to 5 is it looks at all levels of influence. So it is a fantastic tool for conceptualizing and wondering about a child and their behaviors. And then in my time with Khadija, she also mentioned a client is anyone to whom we apply our mental health lens. So we may refer to them as a consultee, and we might refer to them as a client. So why does this matter? What did I find as to why this might matter? First of all, it has been shown that high teacher stress level, there's a direct correlation to increased rate of suspension or expulsion by that teacher or in that classroom. Walter Gilliam in 2006 did a study that showed that the expulsion rate in a classroom where teachers reported low stress was 4.9%. The expulsion rate of those who reported average stress was 9.3%. And the expulsion rate of those who reported high stress was 14.3%. And I also want to throw in my own caveat that despite the stress level, I feel those are still pretty high numbers, and that's shown in the rates of expulsion and suspension that occurs in early childhood settings. Also, the teacher's mental health. This was another Walter Gilliam study, and it was done in 2021, which showed of those who U.S. child care professionals reporting, 56% reported being depressed, and 68% reported moderate to severe stress. If these adults who are working every day, many waking hours with these children, if over half of these adults are depressed, are stressed, may have other mental health disorders such as anxiety, if we're not supporting those adults, we're not going to be able to have a positive impact on suspension and expulsion. And I do believe that the clinical lens helps us know how to support these adults. And then looking at children's mental health and family stress. Children's mental health can show up in a lot of different ways. Internalizing behaviors. Those are the kids who might disappear. Somaticizing, they always have a tummy ache, they always have a headache, something is always going on with them. And then the ones that usually get a consultant called in, those externalizing behaviors, because many times those who are caring for young children find the externalizing behaviors challenging. We also understand that children grow and develop in systems. We understand the impact between interpersonal relationships, the impact on children's well-being when looking at the interpersonal relationships between the teachers in the classroom. Those teachers are modeling how to be in relationship. And if there's stress between the teachers, then the classroom environment is shifted. We look at the relationships between the child care staff and families. Many times when I get called in for a child focused consultation, that is a stressed relationship. The families are tired of hearing all the negative things that their children are doing. The child care staff might be frustrated because it doesn't feel like the family is partnering with them. Knowing how to navigate those relationships and support them is part of my clinical training that I bring into it. The last part on this page I want to talk about is, you can see I have it in green, IECMHC. The invitation of mental health is part of the position title. In my experience is all I can speak to. When people see that I'm an infant early childhood mental health clinician, they don't think, oh, she knows a lot about infant early childhood mental health. They think, oh, she is a mental health trained person coming in to talk about young children. So there seems to be an assumption of clinical training and what I bring into the relationship. So this assumption that I've run into invites vulnerability. It invites people to share and disclose information that is personal, with the assumption that it will be protected. So the assumptions that come with that can also be negative, of the stigma. People don't want to work with me because I am a mental health clinician. And then that ethics piece comes into play too. I'm guided by my board who licensed me. I'm guided by my clinical training, my ethics. An LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, licensed professional counselor, have their own set of ethics that they are guided by. What is an IECMHC guided by? What ethics are they guided by? What is informing them? Would it make sense for us to have our own, this field to have its own defined ethical standards to guide the work? This is something to consider and to wonder. Also, I want to just note that all who are clinically trained are not licensed. So they may not be governed by the same board, such as a licensed clinician. So, okay, good. Sorry, I'm happy with the time. We're going to look at a situation here. And what I want you to do is to think about what is informing your understanding of the situation I share and what is informing your next steps. After each one I bring up, I'm going to invite you what you became curious about after you had that information. And then hopefully I'll have time to look at that towards the end. So you just received a referral for a child-focused consultation. You learned that you have a 3.5-year-old Caucasian female who has aggressive behaviors in the classroom, including punching peers in the stomach, kicking and throwing chairs, mainly towards peers and one teacher. And part of the concern is that peers are becoming afraid of her. This child attends full-day childcare and is in the 3-year-old room. So in chat, if you could just take a few seconds and put, with this information, what are you curious about? What do you want to know more of? Just glancing over at chat to see if it's watched.
And I'll keep an eye on chat with you as well.
Because I don't want to go to the next one until you have had a chance to get this into chat there. Now it's going. Great. Thank you for those of you who are putting it in there. I'll give just a few more seconds. Okay, now you you've received this. You're meeting with the parent to tell them about this process, to get their consent. These are some things you learn. Dad completed suicide recently. The child was at the child care center when it happened. Before Dad's passing, the child was easygoing, happy, and independent. Now she is aggressive, angry, and resorts to acting like a toddler. Mom's words. And this is a compilation, just so you know. And has a younger sibling. Okay, in chat, now what are you curious about? And also holding in mind what informed your understanding and next steps. Now I see chat going. And then last, we meet with the teacher. The teacher reported having a good relationship with the child and now finds herself challenged by the changes. This is the primary teacher in the classroom. The aggressive behaviors are targeted toward this teacher. The teacher lost her father to suicide before she was in kindergarten. Whoops, go back. I hit one too many buttons. So again, what are you curious about? And if you're willing to, you can throw into chat. Actually, let's see. I have 8 minutes, yes?
You do indeed, yes. And you've got lots of great information coming into chat.
No. Okay. I'm going to pause this because I want to get to this. I'm going to finish my last few slides and then we're going to circle back to this and use whatever time we have for it. This is, I tell you, I wish this was longer. Okay. Workforce considerations. Why? Why did Colorado come up with a waiver program? Why are people who are not clinically trained being able to come into this field, this title? One, they really want to diversify the workforce. As Khadija just mentioned, if you were in what was occurring before my time, matching the race of the consultant and the consultee can have a positive impact. And right now, the majority race of consultants doesn't match the greater diversity among those who work with young children in a care setting. Also, the desire to increase accessibility to a consultant. All these care providers need support, and they want to be able to offer that to many more. And so increasing the accessibility is another reason. Also, and right now, what I'm holding in mind is our rural populations, especially. They have fewer people to pull from to come into this workforce, and especially fewer people who might meet the requirements that are needed. So I had a discussion with my agency's DEI manager about this because I really wanted to take some time to reflect on the intent and the impact. And she asked, who is the most affected person when an IECMHC does not have clinical training? I need to correct myself. They asked, who is the most affected person when an IECMHC does not have clinical training? And so we talked about how the consultant is impacted, how the consultee is impacted, and how the child is impacted. So potential risks that may impact all. Again, the title itself can be an invitation to vulnerability and disclosures by the consultee. And on our team and in my own, I have had consultees disclose being in a domestic violence situation. They have disclosed their childhood experiences to me, positive and negative. Angels in the nursery, ghosts in the nursery. Suicidal ideation. On our team and other peers that I have consulted with or talked with, they've had to do a suicide assessment on the spot. Trauma has been disclosed, and then grief and loss has been disclosed and shared. I've worked with twice now some recently widowed care providers who also have their own young children. The clinical training and experience provides definitions of how to create and enforce clear boundaries in interactions, relationships, and how disclosed information is held. And another term, you can tell I spent a lot of time with Khadija. Another term that I wrote down in my notes was she said, one of the tricky things about being a consultant is the consultee is not only a client, but they're a collaborative colleague. So how you navigate both roles and how that looks like. Potential risks to the consultant. Are there some who does not have clinical training? What if they were to hear, and I know it happens, information that is very vulnerable for the consultee to disclose, and it might cause the consultant their own trauma or their own emotional reaction, maybe not to the level of trauma, but their own emotional reaction. And then they don't have the support or the skills needed to care for themselves, for their own well-being. And then another one came up when I was having a discussion is the liability insurance. If a consultant is not clinically trained, what does that liability insurance look like? What is going to protect them if someone were to retaliate against something they did? And then another one, and I do believe she's here, brought up the potential risks to a licensed supervisor of providing supervision to a consultant who is not clinically trained. Does that put any liability or risk to their own licensing? So these are things to consider. This is not all inclusive. So I want to share that in this process, I entered with openness and curiosity. I was really, truly seeking to understand what information, what assumptions, biases I had that were shaping my reaction to the waiver program. I was not seeking to prove my view, and my goal is not to guide you to the same conclusions that I have come to. I invite you to reflect and wonder on the questions that are on the screen and then some. So what needs are consultants meeting that can also be met by someone without clinical training? That's something to wonder about. Could multiple positions and career pathways be created to meet these needs? Maybe a social emotional specialist. And another one, what skills and knowledge does someone need to come into this position? And what skills and knowledge can be developed within the position? And this one's not on the screen. Those are some of the immediate things to be looking at. And then a bigger thing to be looking at is to become a licensed mental health clinician, you need higher education. And there's very real systemic barriers to BIPOC and other marginalized populations of having access, equal access to higher education opportunities. So taking time to think about these and other things. So now I am going to stop sharing so that I can see you and chat. Okay, so Sarah, since you had a chance to look at them, will you anything in chat
Yes.
that you think is worth highlighting? Okay, it's all worth highlighting. Anything that you want to
There are
spend?
two
Oh, it's our
questions.
time's up.
Our time is up. So
Yeah,
there are
time is
two
up.
questions that came in, but we are at the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's time to do what they need to do before moving on to what's next.
Absolutely.
What would be great, maybe Corinna, if you could just take a look at the notes in the chat, and then we can add when we post. So all of the materials from the sessions will be posted in Cvent after the session. And Corinna, we can check on getting maybe additional responses up in there as well.
Are you able
Thank
to?
you.
I can save the chat. Okay, thank you. I just did.
Okay. And
Yes.
thank you everybody so much. Thank you so much, Corinna, for this really sort of helpful and thoughtful workshop. And we look forward to continuing with all of you in other events as we go through the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I wish you well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.